You sit down at your desk in the morning with a full list of things to do. By the end of the day, you're exhausted. But when someone asks what you actually accomplished, you freeze. You scroll through your memory like a broken file system. There were emails? Sure. A few calls. Some tabs you opened and never closed, but nothing feels concrete enough to say out loud. This isn't procrastination. You weren't scrolling social media for hours or watching videos. You were busy. You felt the weight of it all day. Yet somehow, when you try to reconstruct your day, it evaporates. The usual explanation is that you're distracted, that you lack focus or discipline, that you need better time management or a stronger morning routine. But that's not what's happening here. What's actually going on is something researchers call task fragmentation. It's the way modern work breaks down into dozens of micro-actions that never feel like complete tasks. And it creates a very specific kind of psychological emptiness. Your brain doesn't store busyness the same way it stores accomplishment. When you finish something with a clear beginning, middle, and end, your memory holds on to it. It becomes a reference point. You can say, "I finished that report," and your brain agrees. But when your day is made up of half-finished responses, partial updates, quick fixes, and maintenance actions, nothing gets encoded as meaningful. You were doing things constantly, but none of them had closure. And here's the uncomfortable part. A lot of what we now call work is designed this way. It's not built for completion, it's built for continuation. Think about your inbox. You don't finish your emails. You process the urgent ones, flag a few for later, draft replies you'll send tomorrow, and mark others as read just to clear the notification. None of that feels like a task. It feels like triage. The same thing happens with documents. You open a spreadsheet to update one cell. You switch to a presentation to change a date. You jump into a shared document to leave a comment. Each action takes 2 minutes, but none of them moves anything to completion. Or consider a meeting. You attend, you contribute, you leave. But what did you produce? Often, nothing. You discussed a problem. You agreed to circle back. Someone took notes you'll never read. The meeting existed, but it didn't resolve. Even the language we use reflects this. We talk about putting out fires, keeping the plates spinning, staying on top of things. These are all metaphors for preventing collapse, not for building something. Research into attention and memory shows that the brain prioritizes events with emotional weight or narrative structure. A completed project has a story. You started it, you struggled, you solved a problem, you delivered. That gets remembered. But when your day is a stream of small interactions with no clear outcome, your brain has nothing to anchor to. The tasks blur together. They don't form a sequence. They just pile up into a vague sense of having been occupied. This is why you can work hard all week and still feel like you did nothing. Not because you're lazy, not because you're inefficient, but because the structure of the work itself resists being remembered. And it's not just digital work. Even physical tasks can fragment this way. You tidy the kitchen, but it's messy again by dinner. You organize your desk, but papers reappear the next morning. You respond to a question from a coworker, and 5 minutes later they ask something else. The effort is real, the time is real, but the result doesn't stick, so your brain discards it as noise. One study on task interruption found that when people are pulled away from a task before finishing, they struggle to recall what they were doing even minutes later. The incomplete task doesn't get filed, it just fades. Now imagine a workday built almost entirely out of interruptions. Slack messages, calendar reminders, a coworker stopping by your desk, a notification from a project management tool. Each one pulls you into something but rarely lets you finish it. You're not switching between tasks. You're switching between fragments of tasks. And your brain never gets the satisfaction of closure. This creates a very specific kind of fatigue. Not physical exhaustion, not even mental burnout in the traditional sense. It's more like cognitive static, a feeling that you've been thinking all day but you can't point to a single thought. And when you try to reconstruct your day, you realize how little of it felt like yours. You were reacting, responding, managing, but you weren't driving anything forward. The strange part is that this can happen even on days when you barely stopped moving. You answered 30 messages. You updated 5 different systems. You participated in 3 back-to-back calls. You were visibly, measurably busy. But because none of those actions had a natural endpoint, your brain treats them as background noise. They happened, but they didn't matter enough to store as memories. This is where people start to blame themselves. They think, I should be better at prioritizing. I should say no more often. I should block off deep work time. And maybe that helps, but it doesn't change the fundamental architecture of how modern work operates. Because the truth is, a lot of workplaces reward responsiveness over completion. Being available is valued more than finishing. Looking busy is safer than admitting you spent 3 hours on one thing. So you adapt. You keep your inbox under control. You attend the meetings. You stay on top of the messages. And at the end of the day, you've done exactly what was expected of you, but none of it feels like something you did. There's also another layer to this. The fragmentation doesn't just affect memory. It affects identity. When you can't name what you did, you start to lose the sense that you're building anything. Your work becomes invisible, even to you. And over time, that invisibility starts to feel like insignificance. You begin to wonder if what you're doing actually matters. This also explains why hobbies feel so different. When you cook a meal, you finish it. When you read a book, you turn the last page. When you build something, you can hold it. These activities have edges. They have completeness. And your brain knows the difference. It remembers the things that had shape, the things that started and stopped, the things that gave you something to point to. Work used to be more like that. You made a thing. You delivered a thing. You saw the result. Now, for many people, work is an ongoing process that never ends, only pauses. And this isn't about glorifying the past or saying everything was better before. It's just an observation. The structure has changed, and that structure affects how we experience time. It also affects how we talk about productivity. We're told to focus, to prioritize, to eliminate distractions. But the real issue isn't distraction. It's that the work itself is fragmented. Fixing your habits won't fix that. You can time block your calendar, turn off notifications, and work in 90-minute sprints, and you might feel more focused. But if the tasks themselves don't have closure, you'll still end the day feeling like you can't explain what you did. The fragmentation also compounds over weeks and months. When every day feels unmemorable, the weeks blur together. You look back at a whole month and struggle to identify what changed, what moved forward, what you actually built. It's not that nothing happened, it's that nothing completed. And your brain archives completed things differently than it archives ongoing maintenance. This doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're working inside a system that doesn't create the conditions for psychological completion. And recognizing that is actually important, because once you see it, you stop blaming yourself for feeling empty at the end of a busy day. You realize it's not a personal failing, it's a structural reality. And maybe that realization doesn't fix anything, but it does change how you interpret the feeling. You stop asking, why can't I remember what I did today, and start asking, what kind of work actually lets me remember? That's a different question. And it doesn't have an easy answer, but it's the right question. Because the problem isn't that you're forgetting. It's that most of what you did today wasn't designed to be remembered in the first place.